the cloud. Hi, everyone. And Helen is coming in, so we'll do that. Welcome to everyone joining us today. Those who are over 50 and everyone else who is interested to know more about this wise generation. This special online conversation is hosted by the Wize Move Society, the online community for everyone who is over 50 and all those who would love to join us. So during our last summit, Boomer or Bloomer, what's next in April, we experienced again that this generation is growing by the day. We're living longer, are longer, healthy and active, and are better educated than ever. This generation is definitely not on the way out. We're part of the future. So it was again a huge wake-up call that this generation will impact in many ways our society, our economy, the workplace, our healthcare system, and so much more in the years to come. So with these Tuesday live conversations, we aim to give you a glimpse of what is happening on the Wize Move Society, to share a bit about both the challenges and the opportunities that the over 50 are facing, as well as how the members of the Wize Move Society work together to create solutions and play an active role in society and the economy. So for those who join us on Zoom, welcome. We love you to contribute to the conversation. If you have joined us on Facebook, please share your feedback and questions in the comments, so we'll pick it up and respond to it. So my name is Ingun. I'm the founder of Move into the Future and the creator of the Wize Move Society. I'm here today with my co-host, Dr. Tatiana Rowson, and our guest, Robert Baker from the UK. Robert has a long corporate background, started building a portfolio career the last years, is the CEO of Potentia Talent Solution, an expert on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and recently joined our amazing team of Wize Move thought leaders. And together we dive into a much needed conversation, age, the overlooked but critical component of diversity and inclusion. But before we do that, I would like to give my co-host, Tatiana, the floor so she can share a bit more about her background, and she will pass on the stage to Robert. So, Tatiana, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Tatiana Rowson. I'm a psychologist, an academic, and a researcher, researching midlife, transitions, and beyond. I'm mainly interested to learn what can we do to improve our aging, improve our lives at that later stage, which seems to be increasing on a year-to-year basis. So if we learn what's going right and if we learn from what's going wrong, we can build a better future, not only for ourselves, but for the next generations to come. So in that note, I'm really pleased that Robert's joining us and joining the conversation. I'm really keen to talk about age as one of those dimensions of diversity and inclusion that sometimes we might overlook. And I will rely on your experience, Robert, to tell me how are these conversations going in industry and your experience. But I'm not going to say any more. I don't like to take over. I'm going to give the floor to you and invite you into the conversation. So welcome.
Well, thanks, Tatiana, and Ingun, thanks also to you for the invitation to be here with you all today. One of the questions actually you asked me kind of really at the start was kind of, well, who am I really, and you know, why am I joining the Wize Move Society? And when I was thinking like, who am I think basically how I describe myself as a social activist. Basically, I personally have a strong sense of purpose because I believe in equity and justice for everyone. And of course, I want to make a difference in the world, and I want to live my own meaningful and purposeful life, and as I said, make an impact in the world. So I'm a great believer in the potential that we all have, whatever our age or whatever our background or whatever our characteristics. And you know, one of the things I love to do is take on new challenges and new things, meet new people. And of course, the Wize Move Society was a fantastic opportunity to get involved with something new and to think with you guys about how we disrupt the existing way of looking at things and doing things. And personally, I love that kind of discomfort when you start disrupting things. So, you know, how can we do that together? And just personally, I am part of the 50+ generation. I was just saying I have an older son and daughter who continually challenge me, if you like, on the whole dimensions of diversity and inclusion, and my wife Pamela. So that's kind of great. But I think the starting point that I have is I realize how much privilege and power I have as a Western European, you know, white cisgendered male. I realize I have a lot of power and a lot of privilege. And for me, I have a duty to, you know, kind of play a part in using that power and privilege to basically support others that don't have that. And it's interesting because when it comes to age, basically, you know, as I said, I'm part of the 50+ generation now. And how do I help myself to escape some of the biases and some of the stereotypes? And how do I maybe look at myself and say, have I got those assumptions and biases? And so that's all very, very kind of interesting background for, you know, kind of why I'm here with you today. But as Ingun said, basically, I've left the corporate world. I spent 40 years there. It's a great liberation, if you like, to be doing what I'm doing now. I've got a portfolio career, which is great, and interested in lots of areas, but they're all really linked with diversity and inclusion and talent development. And how I sort of see it is I'm taking on new things, getting involved in new conversations, which continually intrigue me, challenge me, and hopefully I'll play my part in. So that's, I think, why I'm here today and looking forward to the discussion on diversity, inclusion, and aging.
Thank you, Robert. And before we ask the first questions, welcome to Renee and Helen, who are here on board. So we'll do the first questions with me and myself and Tatiana, and then please dive in so that we can make the discussion and the conversation as lively as possible. And that is actually, you know, when I hear you speak, Robert, and I hear you speak about diversity and inclusion, and that is very important. And I know, you know, you have been already for quite some years doing a lot of work in the space for women to support them. Why? Just a very basic question, but why is that diversity, equity, and inclusion so important? Not just for organizations, but for society as a whole. Why?
Well, I think it is about giving everyone the opportunity to have opportunity and to unlock the potential that they have in themselves. And I think one of the real challenges we have in society is that often we end up with a privileged group who somehow seem to get most of the opportunities and most of the rewards that go with that. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I think societies that aren't equal or aren't more equal, if you like, or aren't more diverse, are actually unhappier places to be. And studies that I've seen very much link more diversity in a society, you know, with more happiness. And you know, from a male perspective, for example, what we know is in societies that are more gender equal, men are less likely to commit suicide, have mental health problems. And I keep saying, actually, guys, there's lots of benefit for us in being part of you know, a gender equality revolution, because actually it frees us and liberates us from the stereotypes that we men have to be strong and don't cry and all those things that we've grown up with thinking that actually inhibit us and our emotional development, I think. So I think there's a lot of benefit for individuals and a lot of benefit for societies. And I think what we also see is that economically, we do better as well. I mean, you've probably seen all those studies from McKinsey that show that if we manage to liberate all, for example, the female talent that we could have in the workplace, we'd have, I can't remember exactly, was it now $25 billion more added to the GDP, for example, globally. So I mean, it's kind of like, it's a no-brainer in a sense. We need to create opportunities for people that otherwise might be excluded from the workplace and from other opportunities to actually have a part in those opportunities. And I think, you know, it's better for all of those reasons. And when I talk to individual companies, I talk to them about, you know, okay, so why should you as a company be interested in this? You know, what are your customers saying? What is your talent saying? What do you need to do to recruit the best talent, for example. What does your talent actually want in the workplace? And often what we see is things are changing. Customers increasingly want more diversity in the companies that they spend their money with. And employees often want more diversity and inclusion in the companies that they work in, because they believe that's actually a more kind of enjoyable and more sort of a situation where they can develop better. So I think actually it's good for everybody. And I think in a sense, that's why I'm so passionate about it.
Mm-hmm. It is good for everyone. And I absolutely, it really adds to everything that is going on in society and in organizations. But there's, diversity and inclusion. There is, if you look at organizations, but also society, we have gender, we have color, we have society, we have religion, we have LGBTQ, we have, and all these organizations are already, people, their customers want them to pay attention and to change that. Now we need to include age.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, as I mentioned, I think in the LinkedIn post that I made about the talk today, age is the one dimension of diversity that we're all going to be experiencing at some point. So unless I changed my gender, for example, and became a woman, I would never be a woman. I couldn't change my ethnicity to be Black, or I couldn't change, could potentially change, but what I'm basically saying is age is something that happens to all of us. And what we've got to do is understand more about why do we have this bias against age? Why do we worship and glorify youth and actually undervalue the skills, experience and wisdom of older people? I've got to say, I was so delighted. I don't know if any of you watched Glastonbury, but it was that marvelous musical festival in the UK. But it was wonderful to see Diana Ross, in her 80s, Paul McCartney in his 80s, and really rocking the stage, basically showing that actually, the 50+ generation by a long way has still got a lot to offer. And so it's about breaking down those stereotypes that we all have, or we've all had, about aging, and recognizing that this is, if we are biased, it is an ism which we're all going to have to face at some point. So we're all going to be on the receiving end of ageism, for example, and discrimination if we let this continue. And one of the interesting things was for me to understand more about, so why are we all so averse to getting older, for example? And I mentioned, I think in my LinkedIn post, this article called Old Not Other by Kate Kirkpatrick recently, when she looks at the work that Simone de Beauvoir did about the fact that actually the not yet old, as she calls them, are guilty of what she calls bad faith, their aversion to being old. And she talks a lot about, almost actually the disgust, she called it, as we age, our bodily declines, how people see those. But I mean, actually, really, it's about changing the conversation to say, look, we have a lot of people in the 50+ bracket who are actually economically very productive. There's a lot that they can offer. And we've got to switch away from seeing them as people that consume excessively and are harming society. We've got to look at how they're actually contributing positively and how they can continue to flourish in older age for as long as possible. Because I don't know about you, but I would quite like to be in the Paul McCartney and Diana Ross bracket, still going strong, and rocking the stage at that point in my life.
I'm still not there at that age, but I would love to do that. I don't have the voice, but it would really be fantastic to be able to be such an important player in that field at that age, and that is in any field, I think. So that is really fantastic. I'm giving the floor to Tatiana, Robert.
Sure.
Thank you. No, I think those points, Robert, you touched, they're all very, very important. The stereotypes, we tend to talk about that, the issue of stereotyping different age groups, and the topic of diversity as well. How important it is that we embrace diversity and extend that to aging. and how once we do that, what we're doing is we're making life easier for all of us, because we don't need to fit in a criteria of success or another stereotype, because we become freer to be individuals, to exercise our individuality at work. Robert, how is the conversation when you go and talk to companies or clients or colleagues? What is the attitude towards age as one of those aspects of diversity? How do you sense the market is in relation to that?
It's a very interesting question, Tatiana, because I think, you know, companies are in different stages of their own development and their own thinking about it. So I can often speak to, for example, tech startups. And let's be quite honest, for example, in a tech startup, you know, the emphasis on youth, wasn't it Mark Zuckerberg that said young people are just smarter, you know, that kind of bias, which you often see. But I think there are companies realizing actually that they have got older workers who have still got a lot to offer, but who actually want to work more flexibly as well. They don't necessarily want to work, you know, the 9 to 5, the 5 days a week. And I know, for example, when I was working alongside Unilever, they were looking at a platform for allowing their employees to work more flexibly, their older employees to work more flexibly. And possibly also, there are platforms out there where you could work for more than one company at the same time, so that you could actually have a flexible platform that would allow you to offer your skills to a number of different companies. And essentially, you could choose the hours that you worked and then obviously do the things you wanted to do with the rest of your time. So I think companies are in different stages of development in their thinking. To some extent, it depends on the sector that they're in, and also whether there are any elements of their customers that might mean that by taking a more enlightened view, in my case, thinking about it that way, to age, that might mean they can benefit. So what we know, for example, I think, is that there are some companies in the retail sector that said, actually, we need to have older workers in our workforce because actually our customers feel that they're better served by older workers, for example, because older workers are more experienced, they're more patient, they're more knowledgeable, you know, and so actually with those kind of companies, there are actually more opportunities. So yeah, there's no straight answer to that one, essentially, Tatiana. I think, you know, with every company that I go to, there's a bit of a different conversation about where they are and where they need to get to. But I think the key thing is basically what we see overall is that companies aren't doing enough on aging and ageism. So what we see is, and I think I referenced that Chartered Management Institute survey in the UK, which showed that 85% of the people that they surveyed thought that older workers were underrepresented in their company, and only 5% thought their company was actually doing enough about it. So, I mean, it kind of does really reflect the fact that companies are often talking the talk, but they're not walking the walk on this. And, you know, one of the interesting questions is why? And sometimes they say, well, actually older workers are more expensive, you know, so therefore we like to let them go gently towards the end of their careers because then our costs come down. You know, I can certainly challenge that one. But you know, there are a variety of reasons, if you like, why. But and of course, in some cases, it's because executives maybe haven't quite got to that 50+ point. But of course, they will at some point. And then those executives will be suffering potentially the same bias and discrimination if they're not careful. So I often say to companies, look, you know, you've got to think this through, how your whole workforce is affected here and how you make the most of the skills and talents that these older workers have. Because frankly, what we see is when they leave companies, some of them go off and do some really amazing things afterwards. They start up new companies, they go and work somewhere else and they have amazing success. There's nothing in magic that happens when you get to 50 that means you stop becoming productive or you can't be a genius anymore. Some of the most brilliant companies and some of those most brilliant inventions were done by people, you know, in the 50+ generation. So, you know, I think companies need to recognize that and then start thinking, okay, so how can we be more proactive around keeping our older workers and, shock horror, maybe even recruiting older workers, you know, because I think that's the dimension that we're going to be seeing coming through. And of course, we've got this big competition for talent right now. Everyone's been talking about the great resignation, the great reshuffle, the great rethink. Companies are short of workers. So any chief executive, any board, any executive team worth their salt have got to be thinking, where do we find some of this talent in places we haven't looked before? I know, we need to think more about how we treat our older workers and how we attract and retain them. So yeah, it definitely differs depending on which kind of company you're talking to, what sector they're in, and the stage in their thinking on it. But to go back to your earlier point, Tatiana, if you can work on the issues that older folk face in the workplace, you can work on the issues for all the sectors and dimensions of diversity. Because a lot of the things that you need to do are the same. You know, you need to actually, for example, listen to the voices of the older workers in the work. I mean, you know, so many companies don't even listen to what their older workers want. So, you know, start there. This role modeling, for example, that needs to happen in the company, where you actually show that older workers can be successful in the organization. Mentoring and reverse mentoring that older workers can participate in. There's so many things that companies can be doing to do a better job on this. And so I think, as that CMI research shows, we've got to put pressure on them to do a better job. And I think their customers will. I think increasingly their investors will start putting pressure. And of course, I think just the pressure of them trying to recruit talent, I think will start to mean that they start to look at this, the older 50+ generation with a bit more you know, opportunity for them to show what they can do.
It's interesting, Robert. I can't help it to think that I think workplaces and organizations need to do a big rethink of how structure work itself.
Yeah.
Because that 9 to 5 post-industrial revolution kind of work, it's not quite representing how people are working today and how work could be organized that in a way that could include more people, different contributions, and so on. So for the companies, they're already thinking of those platforms and sharing workers and allowing that flexibility. I would say thumbs up for them, because that's the future, because the old model doesn't serve the purpose to a lot of people, not only as we age, but to young families and so on, all the other aspects of life that people feel under pressure to attend to, as well as work.
Absolutely. And of course, what we are seeing now is the emergence of new platforms for anyone of any age. So I came across a platform recently called Hoxby, which is basically allows you to freelance your services to a variety of different companies at the same time. And Hoxby is the platform that will actually do all of that for you. And I mean, that's kind of perfect if you want to have, you know, more flexibility over when you work and what you do. And I think a lot of people have escaped from the corporate world, because actually look at the McKinsey research recently, what they see in the corporate world is managers that don't really care about them, work expectations that are overburdening and unrealistic, and, you know, not enough time for development, etc. Well, actually, when you look at that, you think, my gosh, that's an indictment of the corporate world, that they can't have an environment where they feel cared for, where they don't feel supported, where they don't feel developed. So it's not surprising they're stepping away from the corporate world and saying, let me find an alternative. And that's why I think, as you say, companies have got to really rethink what they're doing if they want life in a company in the corporate world to be as attractive in the future.
It's interesting, Robert. I'm puzzled with the CIPD research that the underrepresentation of older workers. I'm going to have a look at that, because one thing that I can't help it to think or imagine is that when people are asked about older workers or older people, the representation in their heads are people that actually look much older than actually we do look at this stage. So the very wrinkly, very gray hair, frailty, all these things you associate with age, that's not necessarily how the 50+ look like, because everyone's looking sensational these days. Everyone is fit, and I can see around where I live, they're all on the bikes out there. And there's a big overlap between this idea of old and actually what an older person looks like and acts and behaves and so on, that even when we ask, we cannot recognize that someone is actually in that age group.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because if you're talking about 50+ and we're talking about 100-year lives, at 50, we're just talking about half of your life. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, then what we know is that people are very different in their 50s, in their 60s, in their 70s, in their 80s, and their 90s, and into their hundreds. You know, we know that they're very different. We know that they face different challenges. But I think one of the things that is really helpful is if we spend time with people at these different stages in those different decades. So one of the things that I really benefit from is I spend quite a bit of time in Florida in the US, where there's lots of people in their 80s and their 90s still playing tennis, still playing golf, still swimming. I mean, they're absolute inspiration for what they're still doing. And actually, they would be annoyed if I said, "You're still doing that?" They say, "Well, take out the word still. I'm doing it." You know what I mean? That's a bias in itself. You know, you mean you're still playing golf? I'm playing golf, you know, and I'm just as competitive as I ever was. So, you know, it's subtly in our heads here, these images of what people are. But what we know is that if we have a good diet, so for example, I'm sure you're familiar with the Blue Zones Project, which looked at the regions of the world where people live longer. And what they looked at was the diet these people had. And, you know, if we follow that kind of diet, then I think actually it does help support our health. And there are a number of other factors they looked at, for example, like, you know, the communities we live in, for example, you know, are we sociable? Are we spending time with friends? You know, we know there are all these factors here that can help us feel younger. And I was reading at the weekend an article written by a guy that said basically what he does. He goes to bed every night and he imagines himself 20 years younger. And that's his way of he says, I'm still as healthy as ever. I'm still as fit as ever. I'm still as productive as ever. And it's kind of like a mindset thing. And I think this is it, basically, that if we keep the mindset of unlimited possibility, we can do anything, you know, let's keep going until we can't do it anymore. But I think there's a famous phrase, use it or lose it, okay? And I think it applies hugely here, which is I want to carry on doing my hiking, playing my guitar, you know, doing whatever it is I'm doing, you know, until the day that I actually can't do that anymore. And I think that's the attitude. So when we look at older folk, gosh, I mean, well, you know, kind of where do we start? Because as you said, if it goes from 50, there's so many stages you can go through in, you know, in 50 and beyond, and so much, you know, opportunity still to do things. And I think what we see now is people that would have been regarded as pensioners some years ago, they're now some of the most active, healthy and fit people on the planet because they've actually got time to get away from their desks and, you know, exercise and look after themselves and do all those good things. But what helps them is if they have purpose and if they have a meaning to what they're doing. What I have found is the biggest challenge and how you age much more quickly is if you do not have purpose and a sense of meaning to what you're doing. So for me, for example, when I left Mercer, in theory, I could have retired. But, you know, for me, I don't use the R word because I think the minute you say retirement, people think, oh, okay, so now you're going off on cruises, your pipe and your slippers and all of that stuff. And you know, for me personally, that couldn't be further from the truth. So you know, yeah, we do need to rethink about this, and we need to look at people in the 50+ age bracket in a completely different way because we are full of the most amazing potential, and you know, so I want to keep kind of showing that.
Thank you, Robert. You nearly spoiled retirement for me. If you're not going to go on cruises or play golf, what's that all about?
Well, I think you could do some of it, but I think, you know, when I was talking to some of my friends from university recently who have retired, if you're right, or they're in the retirement age bracket, a couple of them said to me that basically they're a bit of a loose end because they were doing purely what they call leisure activities. And I've got nothing against that. If that's what you want and you are very happy doing that, then that's absolutely fine. But it was interesting, those observations. A couple of them said, you know, actually, there are times when I really feel, you know, like, what do I do now? You know, I've read the paper, drunk my coffee, you know, like, what do I do today? Kind of thing. And of course, what's interesting, especially when you have couples in retirement, you know, do they do things together or do they do things individually and separately? It's an interesting dynamic when you have, you know, the typical heterosexual couple and, you know, one of them retires or they both retire from work, and then, you know, how they then conduct their lives from there. So I think basically it comes back to what I said was find what it is that motivates you to get up in the morning, find your purpose, find your meaning. It could be cruises, it could be golf for sure. For me personally, what I found, it was still playing an active part in the world of companies, the world of talent, the world of diversity and inclusion. And crucially, that gave me two things. One, it gave me a connection with a whole bunch of really interesting people, like the people on this call, who I'm now so pleased to be in touch with, because I'm learning from you, and we're sharing great times together. And so immediately I feel more connected, which is fantastic. And I think the other thing is really I've got something to get really interested in, something I'm curious about, something I can explore, and that's another great thing. So I think everyone has to find their own way, but personally what I would say is just have an open mind about what anybody 50 plus can do, because like I said, they can rock Glastonbury, they can do anything.
I think so. Yeah. I think your wife already has your slippers somewhere close. So that at least a couple of days per week you will be retiring. Oh gosh. Okay, Renee, yeah. Maybe you have some questions.
Okay, this is nice. Hi, Robert. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Of course, we met already, so I'm not going to talk about who I am. But yeah, there's a lot in what you share that rings a bell with me. Some things are, when I look back to, let's say, the generation of our parents, that was the generation that, they looked forward to maybe retire at 55 or 60, if it was possible, I know that I started working and paid my dues and pension and retirement funds because I would be retiring at 60. And back then I thought, well, that's actually great because, then I've worked for 35 years and it will be great. And so I think that there's been a tremendous shift in this one generation from, okay, I'm 60 or 65 and it's done. I'm sitting, maybe playing golf or whatever and doing the cruises, to the generation that we are seeing now, which is just sort of active, all the things that you mentioned, and want to be purposeful, want to be meaningful, want to achieve things, want to mean something in the world around them. So when you look back, like a generation, 30, 40 years, there is a change, I think.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And look, I don't want you to get the impression that I'm working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. My wife definitely says,
it's freer, right? It's more free. It's more your
exactly.
Choice,
Yeah. But so for example, I take Fridays off as a day I don't work, right? So that's one thing, right? I take time in the US with my American wife. We go to see her family. I'm going to spend a month there from the middle of July to the middle of August, and I'm going to do very much less work because I want to catch up with all these books I need to read. So I think, what it is, Renee, I think, is that I've got more control now over when and where I work. And I've developed this new work style, basically, which means that I can work from Florida, I can work from Paris, I can work from Amsterdam, I can work from anywhere because of the technology that we all obviously experienced, especially during the pandemic. We knew now remote working, flexible working can happen. So basically, I think what we've got now is a fantastic opportunity to carve out the kind of life and the work style that we want, which you're quite right, there wasn't really there maybe 10, 15 years ago. So we should definitely take the opportunity to do that. I think we're very fortunate that we can.
Yeah. The other thing that I really liked in what you spoke about is that, because I've always said, okay, D&I, if we can just get age groups in D&I, it's always the easiest if you can sort of slot things in existing initiatives or existing policies. The thing that made me think about once more is we all age. So the thing you mentioned, like a woman, of course, she can become a man, but it's not what you typically do, So, or a white person cannot be black, but we all age, and I think that's really an interesting pointer or trigger that we can take to also bring across to organizations as a lever, maybe even to have more impact in their policies. Because if you play on the emotions of your executives or whatever, like, hey, think about when you age, when you are 50, 60, how would you like to be treated? That may be a different way to sort of get the burning platform.
Well, it's interesting because I had a conversation with an investment banker a few years ago, and this was the HR director in an investment banking firm. And what she said was that actually she's finding that the investment bankers didn't want to just kind of quit when they were in their late 40s with loads of money. Some of them actually wanted to stay working because actually they really kind of enjoyed what they were doing. And for her, this was kind of a new thing that people were wanting to do that. So I think, it does come back to really saying, look, let's get away from these biases and stereotypes that hold us back. These biases that older people become less effective and less productive as they get older. Let's think about what actually they've got to offer and can contribute, which, as I say, often gets undervalued by companies. And let's kind of rethink about what's the right way to give them the opportunity to succeed, no matter what their background, no matter what their characteristics other than age. And I think once we start looking at that in that way, it means we think about inclusion, because everybody's included in the discussion, because everybody's going to age. We've got to think, I think we've got to think that through. So yeah, I'm very inspired by the fact that, there's groups like Wize Move Society now, because I think by pushing this focus on age 50 plus will force a lot more companies to be thinking seriously about what they're doing, and making sure that these opportunities for older workers continue to be there.
Well, do you want me to jump in? Ingun, do you want to come in?
Yes, I always also wanted to ask Helen if she wants to say, because she mentioned that she needs to leave early because of her platform Age Liberation that is starting in 10 minutes. Helen, can you hear me? Yes. Maybe you want to share something or have a question for Robert?
Well, I want to thank Robert for being on the same wavelength as I'm on. It's delightful to hear somebody who's talking so optimistically about some of the changes that I personally have not seen happen. I'm in Canada, Robert, and I've been working in this space for about 4 or 5 years as well. And I just wrote to you on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect, to learn more from you and to share some of our experiences. You said you worked with Mercer. How long ago did you leave, and what was the state of DEI when you left? Was age included, even mentioned?
Age was one of the dimensions,
Okay.
but the biggest focus, to be honest, when I was working diversity inclusion, and I left a couple of years ago, was gender, but then ethnicity, because there, and of course, what you got to remember is Mercer is a US-owned company, and of course, in the US, diversity and inclusion has gone a little bit further ahead, if you like, or been doing it for a bit longer. Therefore, they got into areas that have gone on from the focus on gender, which was principally the focus in Europe at the time. So I think what we're all seeing now is that actually, given that we are all individual human beings with a whole collection of characteristics, gender, age, ethnicity, whatever, in a sense, it's sometimes not so productive to think about these groups individually and think, actually, look, we're all part of this. We all need to be included. How do we include everyone? And I was interested, Helen, in your comment. Are you saying, therefore, you're seeing less progress in Canada on this age issue? Because that seems to be what you were implying.
Yeah, I am. But I also think that there's less progress in the United States too on the age dimension. That's all I was referencing. There's tons of discussion now, but for the first time, but that's because of the work shortage and not because of the real understanding of the need, I think, for older workers with the mixed age workforce. But I'm seeing that I'm continuously talking to people who understand. And when I'm invited to speak to groups that have no connection, like in this group here, everything is new to them. They never thought of it. It's awakening to them. So I really think I'd love to think of ways that we can get out of our bubbles so that we can get more information out to those people who don't know what you are speaking of.
Well, one of the things, Helen, that I do.
Yeah, that's why we're doing these live.
I know, I get it. Thank
but
you.
actually,
Thank you.
what we can also do is we can use our platforms that we have. So I have LinkedIn, for example, a very powerful platform to speak the gospel about how we need to rethink. And all the meetings that I have with companies and anyone of any influence in the space of talent and HR and company development, I'm talking about this all the time and linking it back to why it's not just the right thing to do, which of course it is, but actually economically it's beneficial for them as well. And it's better for the individuals and to try and kind of take this separation between companies and individuals. I mean, companies are made up of individuals, right?
I know.
So it's kind of like, why do we talk about companies over here and individuals over here? So what we kind of need to get is executive teams seeing that this is something they really kind of need to engage in for themselves. And also for the workers in their company and for the shareholders in the company, et cetera, et cetera. So, we need to have more of those conversations. I agree. And we need to use our platforms like this one and like others we have to get the message out there and link up with other people. I'm one of the Joyces, for example. I'm linked up with Brave Starts. I'm linked up with Grace Matter in the UK, which is, and we link these up together and together we have a louder voice rather than having an individual voice. Absolutely. So lots we can do, Helen.
Yeah, I know, and I'm doing all of that, and I'm not disparaging anything you're saying. I think that culture change takes time.
Yeah.
And we're at that time when it's really important. We just had the release of our census. So Canada has woken up slightly to the realization that we have more people over the age of 65 than under 14. And that's a big wake-up call, So hopefully our messages will
I mean, from the UK too, we've got an aging workforce, we've got an aging population. I guess where I'm coming from all the time, really. Yeah. And I met this really great guy who's 50 plus, Australian guy who runs the Optimism Centre in Australia. And his first question to me when I met him, it's the first question he asked to everyone, is what makes you optimistic? And I love that question because it forces you to think about the reasons why you should be optimistic for the future. And so I always start from that point. So what is it that makes me optimistic about where we are with aging? It's that actually, people are starting to listen, messages are starting to get out there. Yes, we've got a lot of work to do. Yes, it's going to take time, but we're now much further down the road, I think, in bringing this issue alive and making changes than we were before. So I'm optimistic that we will continue that progress. And these role models, like I said, Paul McCartney, Diana Ross, whoever I'm just picking the music, but there's loads of, in commerce. Well, wasn't Albert Einstein was a brilliant example of someone in his older age who was, coming up with these incredible inventions, and there's loads more 50 plus examples. So, let's keep pushing these role models out as well. And, I've got to say congratulations to Ingun for the fantastic work that she's done with Wize Move Society. And it's nice to be able to recognize that as well. So, like I said, I'm so delighted to be part of this group because I feel we are sharing, a similar perspective, and I think together we can have even more power, if you like, to get the message out there, and that's why I'm so happy to be part of this.
Mm-hmm. I agree with your optimism, but I just want you to know you're really good at projecting it too. So thank you.
Thanks, Helen.
Thank you, Ingun.
Yeah, well, let's look forward to connecting with you, Helen, on LinkedIn, and let's have another conversation at some point.
For sure. Nice seeing everybody.
Helen is also doing amazing work, also with the top 60 over 60, and now with the age liberation. So really great. Thank you, Helen, for joining us, and good luck with the next meeting. I'm moving back to Tatiana.
Oh, the conversation moved on to completely different direction, within the same direction, of course. But I want to bring back to something we said earlier, because I think it's one of the interesting things about age and aging that we should put out there. Robert, you mentioned use it or lose it, which I love that slogan, because it's true. Whatever we don't activate, we over time, we all know that language we stop speaking, or the sport to stop playing, and so on. But there's another aspect as well, which is being misunderstood in a lot of the traditional research on aging, which is as we get older, we let go of things that don't serve us well. And I think this is one of the big advantages of experience. We know what doesn't work for us. We can selectively choose not to do these things, or choose not to participate, or choose not to engage. And that's a natural part of adult development. But the view that got a stereotype consolidated is, as we get older, we're giving up things, which is not quite what it means.
Well, no, I totally agree. And there's absolutely no reason why anybody should have that view of anybody that's getting older. I mean, personally, what I found, actually, I've taken on more as I've got older. And my portfolio now is extremely large and extremely full. And that's because I'm so passionate and interested in all these different areas. But it's up to us individually. We have a choice to make about how we want to live our lives. You know, do we want to live them to the full? Do we want to take on new things? Do we want to do stuff that we haven't done before? And, you know, of course, we also have to deal with discomfort because there are some things that happen as we get older that are more difficult. So my back, for example, is stiffer in the mornings now. So now I need to spend 15 minutes stretching in the morning and make sure I do my yoga and Pilates and all of that stuff. But that's actually brought a new world of yoga and Pilates now, which, you know, I hadn't really ever explored before. So the need that I had because I'm getting older actually is expanded into a whole new world now. And if we look at it like that and say, you know, how can we make the most of things that happen to us? How can we look at the upside rather than the downside all the time? You know, I think we should be asking, what else can I take on? You know, without obviously overburdening ourselves and causing a burnout or anything like that. But what can I take on? And going back to your point, Tatiana, what can I let go of that doesn't serve me? But what can I take on that would really engage me, interest me, enthuse me, and meet my passion? And I think that's kind of the question we should be asking, and that's the way that we should be looking at it.
And I think that takes the conversation back to purpose and meaning of what we do and how we lead life, especially at this stage. That's become a big self-motivator because we can see the purpose. Wow, that makes that day or that activity really much nicer and much more special. Absolutely.
I think, Renee, were you going to come in there at one point? I think I saw you about to say something.
Just nodding in. So, yes. Well, I do think when you mentioned resilience, because, you know, I have I've done this certification on a resilience tool survey, which I now can practice. And it's interesting because resilience, I always thought, okay, it's something in your genes, whether you're more or less capable to sort of adapt in challenging circumstances and bounce back. And of course, that's still true, but there are other things happening. Like purpose, like having purpose, like having your community, your network that is supportive, like dealing with your emotions. And when I was in the certification, the teachers told me, okay, there's research that older people in generally score a little bit higher on this resilience survey because of all these facts that we are mentioning, the purpose, the network, I mean, not all, but most in general. It's just what us 50 or 60 plus people just seem to be a little bit better at, you know, so to the point that there's a shift in what we maybe can offer than in comparison to 30 years ago when we were 30 and, you know, eager to make our careers, and now it's just in a different phase. So yeah,
absolutely.
That's an interesting element of being a little bit older, that your resilience may also be.
Yeah.
I think another angle, which is very important, I think, as we age, is actually we start to think of others and not just ourselves. Yes. And I think when you look at what brings you joy, at least, you know, I think about what brings me joy. And I've read a very interesting book recently by the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. It's the conversations that they had about how to bring joy into the world. Their recipe for joy basically is a sort of empathy with others and this basically understanding of the lives of others and the experience of others, that you put yourselves in others' shoes to really sort of see that, and generosity towards others that actually you know makes us happy and brings us joy. And I think, you know, one of the things I've seen as I've aged, I'm well past the 50+ point now, and 60s for that matter as well. But what I've noticed in myself is I've developed a keener sense of what I can do to support others and help others. And actually, that has very much really supported the work that I do in diversity and inclusion. Because I said right at the start, one of the things I've been taxing myself with is, how do I use my privilege and power to support those that don't have it? And there are various ways in which I do that, and I encourage others to do that. But a lot of what I'm seeing now is part of my resilience, actually, is realizing that it's not just about me, it's about what impact can I have others. And then, of course, you start to think, well, what's my legacy going to be? If I do depart the planet tomorrow, will there be people missing me? Would there be people say, well, actually, that person helped me at a particular point in my career, or they did something that was meaningful to support me? And I that's the way I'm starting to think now. And I think because I'm thinking that way, it ties very nicely into some of those other points you mentioned about resilience as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would like to share a story that I had a meeting with a very interesting lady just before this, a cardiologist who retired 5 years ago. My cardiologist, actually, amazing lady, but she has been doing that work for 40 years, just running around and doing all kinds of things on a university hospital. So, there's not just your job, but there's also research and all these things. So she'd been doing a lot of things. And then she retired, and immediately there's all these things and organizations ask you to do this and that. And she was like, oh gosh, within no time, she had all kinds of jobs on the side. And she said, I was doing more than I ever did. And she said, and after that, I was like, there was 3 years that she was supposed to do that for 3 years. And she said, I really learned that if I wanted to do the things that I liked, then I really had to be, to really be me, really become. And then she said, and I saw, actually, that was the moment that I started seeing the world, that I started talking to people the way I wanted to talk to people. I started to discover, and now I see all these opportunities pass by, and I really can select the things that I want to do, that make me happy. But before I could do that, I really had to land to be me, to be able to do that. So now she's really creating the things that she wants to do now in the next phase of her life. But before she could do it, she was so used to just keep running around and doing what was expected to do, that was never happening.
Well, I totally recognize that because what I saw as I kind of started my new chapter was a lot of people came to me through my network and said, oh, I hear you're no longer at Mercer, for example, like, can you come and work with us, and can you come and do something with us? And I thought, oh, that sounds interesting, that sounds interesting, that sounds interesting. And of course, as you know, you then very quickly build up and become overfull. But of course, the thing is, we don't know what's out there at the beginning. So we kind of take stuff on because we don't know where it's going to go or how it's going to develop. And if we're passionate about things and we want to support people, then obviously there is that possibility that we'll overcommit and then get ourselves stressed and even burn out. So I think there's a real learning curve there as we go along there, which says, okay, I want to take some more stuff on. I want to have an impact, want to make a difference, but I've got to find a way also to do it that, at some point I take some time to reflect. And interestingly, I think that's for me, that's this summer. I'm going to take some time this summer to reflect on all the different things I've got in my portfolio. And I'm going to say, what do I want to carry on doing? What do I want to stop doing? How am I going to create any space for something new and exciting that comes along tomorrow? Because at the moment, I don't have much bandwidth, So I think these are the discussions and thought processes we need to go through, actually quite regularly. Because in the end, I think it is about being true to ourselves and what really brings us joy, and what really gets us up in the morning. Like there are some mornings, for example, often I'll get up at 5:30 to work on something. My wife says it's crazy, like, why are you doing that? It's like ridiculous hour to get up in the morning. It's because I'm passionate about what I'm doing, and I'm thinking, and I want to get up and get something down on paper, or I want to type something up and, you know, have an idea and want to follow it through. So it is just about basically realizing that at some point you want to take time out, you want to reflect on things and say, yes, okay, now, you know, how do I want to adjust my way forward? And it's a continual learning process, and it's a continuing development process. But I think the great news is development never stops. Unleashing your potential never stops. Having an impact never stops. And I think those are the things that really inspire me and inspire me from all the things you're doing too.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that is the great moment to say, okay, wow, this has been a great conversation. I'm really aware of the time. Just small, you know, make a tour with all those who are here. And obviously we haven't seen Steve, and he's here, but he doesn't show himself. And maybe you know him, Robert?
I'm not sure, actually. Maybe
no,
I do.
Okay.
We'll see. We'll find out.
Well, maybe next time. Renee,
Yeah.
anything short you want to add? Ah, there he is. Think about something short that you want to add, Stephen. So Renee.
Yeah. I thought I was just a participant. All I wanted to say is it was a great session. I really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
Great.
Thanks for being with us, Stephen. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us. Great. Renee.
Yeah, so my most aha moment, a lot of recognition, but my most aha moment I already mentioned, that is that this aging we all go through, and that's maybe a nugget which we can use in tackling even more. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Robert.
Well, thank you, Renee. It's a great discussion.
Tatiana.
Oh, I think there were too many, yes, a lot of nuggets, of precious nuggets there. But I'm going to pick on the last thing, and Robert, you said, because I think it's really important, time to reflect and revisit things we're doing, discard things to give room to other things. That's really, really important. And it's an exercise that we should do often. So that's part of the secret. So there you are. Thank you.
Robert?
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Tatiana. Robert, one last short thing.
Wow. All I can say is I'm just so happy to have had this discussion with you. It certainly confirmed a lot of the things that I'm thinking about and so passionate about. And I think the key thing is, you know, we can make a huge difference together. So let's get going on it.
Absolutely. And that is actually, you know, when I was listening to all this happening and thinking about what we're doing, of course, in the Wize Move Society. And then I feel like, okay, we need to discuss on this, and we need to have a conversation on that. And how are we going to do this? You know, Wize Moves at the workplace, but also for our individual members. How can we include them more into this discussion? But also, you know, soon to be launched, our entrepreneurial program. It is all there, you know, this whole talking about age and how can you include that in the diversity and inclusion conversation. It is all there. So thank you for that. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for who will be listening after this. It is a glimpse of what is happening in the Wize Move Society, but also, of course, create more awareness out there with all these live conversations. We love to welcome you, of course, online as a member of the Wize Move Society. And next week, we will be here again with a live conversation concerning this over 50 generation. So thank you all, and see you soon.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks. Bye.
Stop live stream, stop recording.